on text number 29. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So before we go on to reading the verse, just a bit of a background. So in this chapter, we are looking at two paths of liberation. So verses number 15 to 21, they describe direct liberation, which is attained by a Paramatma meditator. And verses number 21 to 31 describe gradual liberation, which is attained by a Virat Rupa meditator. Right? So 15 to 21 is all about direct liberation, and 22 to 31 is a gradual process, gradual liberation. Now, why are we reading this, and why do we need to know these things? Because each and every day, as the speakers are going on glorifying these verses, at the end everyone says, but the devotee does not care about liberation. For them, being in devotional service is the topmost thing. So why do we need to know all these things? We must understand that there are atheists in this world who say there is no God. Then there are agnostics in this world who say the existence of God is unknown. And then there are theists in this world who say there is God, just like us. Now, when in the category of theist, there are some people who worship demigods, there are some who worship the universal form, some who worship the God in the heart in Paramatma form, and there are some who worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, Sukadev Goswami is seated in an assembly of sages. Now, these sages, these spiritualists, are from different backgrounds. Some worship demigods, some worship the universal form, some worship Paramatma in the heart. So, what is Sukadev Goswami is doing is trying to attract the attention of all the spiritualists that are present there. And then he is presenting them with a variety of theistic paths, and then he will establish that devotional service is the topmost. Likewise, in our lives as well, when we are preaching, which is most dear to Srila Prabhupada, we will be encountering ourselves with all different kinds of people on different paths. And when we are able to present them with these different paths, but ultimately establish that devotional service is the topmost, then we are able to grab their attention, we are able to hold their attention, and then we are able to communicate our point very nicely. So it's very important that we understand the supremacy of the Lord. It's very important to understand these different paths of liberation, because this will help us. Obviously, the Shraddha will increase for us as well, but at the same time, we will be able to preach back better. So today we are reading from text number 29. And in this section, Sukadev Goswami is explaining Maharaj Parikshit how the yogi gradually transcends from gross and subtle material sense perception. One might think that this is too theoretical, too technical, but Srila Prabhupada has actually lived these verses. Srila Prabhupada was able to conquer all these things. So as we gradually read the purport today, we will break them down into different parts and see how Srila Prabhupada has lived these verses and what changes can we bring about in our own lives if we want to gradually progress. Right? So let's read the verse. Grahaneन gandham rasaneन vairasam रूपं च दृष्ट्या स्वशनं त्वचैव श्रोत्रेण चोपेत्य नभो गुणत्वं प्राणेन चाकूतिमुपैति yogi. Synonyms: grahanena, by smelling; gandham, aroma; rasanena, by taste. Why? Exactly. Rasam, palate; rupam, forms; cha, also; drishtya, by vision; swasanam, contact; tvacha, touch; eva, as it were; srotrena, by vibration of the ear. Cha, also. Upitya, by achieving. Nabha gunatvam, identification of ether. Pranena, by sense organs. Cha, also. Akutim, material activities. Upayati, attains. Yogi, the devotee. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. The devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses, like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. Would anybody like to read the purport, please?
I can read, Mataji.
Sure, Mataji.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Beyond the sky, there are subtle coverings resembling the elementary coverings of the universes. The gross coverings are a development of partial ingredients of the subtle causes. So the yogi or devotee, along with liquidation of the gross elements, relinquishes the subtle causes like aroma by smelling. The pure spiritual spark, the living entity, thus becomes completely cleansed of all material contamination to become eligible for entrance into the kingdom of God. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you so much. Om Ajnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadesha Tarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So this universe is covered by 8 layers, as we are aware: earth, water, fire, air, ether, which is the gross elements, and then mind, intelligence, and false ego, which are the subtle elements of the human covering. Now, Sukadev Goswami here is explaining the path of purification as the devotee transcends both the gross and subtle sense objects. Now, it's easier to conquer the gross ones because they deal with external matter. But subtle sense objects, which comprises of the impressions, the desires, attachments, which are lying deeper inside, they're very hard to conquer. And Srila Prabhupada says, even if one stops the gross activities, subtle desires remain and forces one to act again. Right? And we may have seen it in our own lives when we are, especially after the Damodar month or any other time, when you have tried to perform some sort of austerity, try to control something. Someone may try to give up eating something physically, but still mentally, he or she eats them every day. And that mental engagement causes the bondage. So the subtle desire remains and they force ones to act again. Now, I wanted to start by today sharing where this exactly falls into the stages of bhakti. So I think Sakirai Prabhu in the past has discussed 8 stages of bhakti from Nectar of Devotion, which begins with Shraddha, which is faith, goes on to Sadhu Sangha, association with devotees, Bhajana Kriya, where one takes up devotional practice, Anartha Nivritti, which is removal of unwanted things, and then goes on to Nishtha, steadiness, which then there's Ruchi, which is all about taste, Asakti, which is developing deep attachment, and then Bhava, which where the Ashtabhav rises, it's all about spiritual emotions, and finally Prema, which is pure love of God. I'm sure you must have guessed by now that the things that we're discussing today falls into the category of Anartha Nivritti stage, which is removal of unwanted things. So this verse describes how a devotee, particularly through yogic meditation, becomes freed from deeper, subtler layers that binds the soul. And the devotee surpasses these subtle objects of different senses. Right? That is the first point that has been discussed in the translation today. The devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses. So we can see that bhakti does not destroy senses, it just purifies them. A devotee is able to surpass them. Srila Prabhupada has said many, many times, we do not stop eating, we do not stop sleeping, talking, walking. We simply use everything in Krishna's service. And this is the heart of the verse, where they're starting by saying that a devotee surpasses the certain object of different senses. And then it goes on to say, saying that a devotee surpasses the aroma by smelling. Now, the first subtle object mentioned is aroma. When material fragrance no longer attracts us, but it is the Krishna's fragrance that attracts us, then the sense of smell becomes spiritualized. Right? Srila Prabhupada, when he was once in LA, he said there was this temple room which smelled strong with fragrance, with incense fragrance. And he was apologizing that it is too strong. Sorry, Srila Prabhupada. To which Srila Prabhupada said, let the whole world smell like a temple. The fragrance of incense is the fragrance of devotion. So let the whole world smell like a temple. And this is a perfect example of transcending material smell. In Gopal Champu, Sri Jiva Goswami explains that even the breeze becomes ecstatic when carrying the fragrance of Krishna's body. Even the breeze trembles with fortune. I'll repeat that the breeze trembles with fortune. Imagine even the air becomes the bhakta. Right? So that is surpassing the aroma by smelling. Next, what has been discussed here is surpassing the palate by tasting. Of course, we've discussed several times the importance of prasadam. But just again highlighting something from Gopal Champu, it is said, the flute drinks the nectar of Krishna's lips so deeply that it forgets all other taste. It forgets all other taste, and this is purified taste. So when we eat prasadam, we forget all other taste, and slowly and gradually we develop a taste which is more purified. Then it talks about surpassing vision by seeing forms. Right? When I read this, the first thing that came to my mind was in India, I don't know if you've noticed, but after eating, at least when I was there, after eating pan, the betel leaves, people would spit in the buildings, right, at different corners. And then what I saw was in different buildings, they started putting up at the lower section, they started putting up pictures of different demigods. And because of that, what happened? People stopped spitting pan. And because, why did they stop spitting pan? Because people respect those demigods, people respect those sacred forms. And why does this work? Because the eyes behave very differently in the presence of a sacred form, right? The eyes, suddenly there will be a difference in the way the eyes perceive things when there is a sacred form around us. And this is very important for us to understand. And hence, we have pictures in the house of Krishna. We put different pictures in the house that reminds of us of different tirthasthal, because the eyes behave differently. And if the eyes behave differently, there's a whole science, right? The message that's sent to the mind is different. Then our intelligence reacts differently. Then suddenly there is a remembrance of Krishna that comes into picture. So we have to understand that surpassing vision by spiritual forms, by seeing spiritual forms, works very nicely. Because the vision then becomes regulated, it becomes purified when it is connected with the divine. Though this is a small, very worldly example, right? But imagine if just seeing a picture of demigod makes someone stop bad habits, then what would happen if we fix our eyes on the beautiful form of Krishna? Our heart becomes purified. This is what Srila Prabhupada said, meant when he said, simply by taking darshan of the deity, one becomes purified every day, simply by taking the darshan of the deity. So if we can chant in front of a deity, it's beautiful. That is amazing if we can take out time to chant 1 round, 2 rounds. Obviously, all rounds is best, but if we can take out time to chant at least 1 round in front of deity, our connection with the deity becomes stronger, our vision becomes purified. Of course, we are hearing and chanting. So just imagine all our senses are getting purified at the same time. Because Srila Prabhupada did not see material forms, but he saw Lord's potential service everywhere. I was trying to recall something that Ramai Swami, His Holiness Ramai Swami, had quoted when he was talking about his pastimes, his Leela with Srila Prabhupada. He said once he was in Sydney or maybe Melbourne, he was stuck, Srila Prabhupada, and so Ramai Swami was sitting next to Srila Prabhupada, and they were going to a different location at morning 6 a.m., I think for a Bhagavatam class. Now at 6 a.m., they got stuck in traffic. And Srila Prabhupada was amazed. What's this traffic all about? Why is there so much traffic? He asked. To which Maharaj said that there's traffic because it's too expensive to live very close in the city. So people stay really far off. And then they have to travel 2-3 hours to reach work every day. And then in the evening, again, they have to come back. And when Ramai Swami was saying this, he started thinking, you know what, I'm so lucky, I don't have to get stuck in traffic every day. I'm studying something which is much higher, and I don't want to get entangled into all these material things. He started thinking on all those lines. And just then, as His Holiness Ramai Swami said about this traffic, Srila Prabhupada, a tear dropped from his eye, and he said, look at this world, people are traveling for what? Of course, I'm re-quoting it because I'm just trying to recall. But he said, look at this world, people are traveling for what? They're not able to understand what this life is all about. So Srila Prabhupada, his vision was so purified of the world that he was able to show compassion for every living entity around us. That is surpassing vision. Right? That is purified vision of a great personality. So these senses become purified if we engage our senses correctly. The next thing that has been highlighted here is surpassing touch by contacting. Again, Srila Prabhupada's example, once in Mayapur, mosquitoes were biting him while he was translating at night. A disciple said, Srila Prabhupada, they are biting you. Prabhupada calmly replied, yes, let them take a little prasadam and go. He didn't flinch. He was not annoyed by the touch. His sense of touch was no longer disturbed by material sensation. Why? Because he was translating at that moment. Nothing else mattered. He was translating. He was in contact with Srīmad Bhāgavatam. He was in contact with scriptures. He was in contact with Krishna directly. And that helps us to purify our senses. The next point that has been discussed is the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification. Krishna's flute sound is so sweet that even inanimate objects become ecstatic. So the ears become purified by hearing what? Harinam, Krishna Katha. So when fully engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the mode of material nature and thus comes to a level of Brahman. It says in Bhagavad Gita. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, now this is very important, every sense becomes an entrance to Vrajaras. Once our senses becomes purified, every sense becomes an entrance to Vrajaras. We will be able to experience spiritual world. It says, the last sentence says that qualifies, that makes us eligible for the spiritual world, for the entrance of the spiritual world. So every sense is an entrance to the spiritual world. There is no longer any possibility of contact with material sense objects whenever senses are completely purified. So we can see a devotee's eyes see Krishna, ears hear Krishna, touch experiences Krishna's embrace, taste Krishna's sweetness, smells Krishna's fragrance. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur again explains is in Madhurya Kadambini, explains different types of anarthas which we will not get into, but he talks about the 7 degrees of the way the anarthas are removed. He explains them in 7 degrees. And he lists them in this order. The first one is Utpat. So this is the beginning or the initial reduction of our anarthas. So this is the time when anarthas begins to weaken for the first time. For example, a devotee who used to get very angry very quickly after beginning to chant regularly for some time and with some devotee association, he notices he is not exploding as quickly or as immediately. So the tendency is still there, but the intensity has softened only by a little bit. The next one is the next stage or the next degree is Tanu, which means thinning or becoming weaker. So this is the time when the anartha becomes noticeably weaker. So when we are introspecting, we are able to see, oh, right, I can see that I'm improving a little bit. So it becomes noticeably weaker and occurs less often. The next one is dura, which means dur, so it becomes distant. So the anartha is still not gone, but it feels a little bit distant and occurs rarely, but it still occurs. And we are able to notice that it occurs. The next one is vichinna. So vichinna is intermittent removal. So which means it appears and it disappears. So sometimes the anartha disappears and sometimes it suddenly appears. So there are like on and off periods. So a devotee might remain humble for weeks, but suddenly gets hit by a pride. And this pride can occur not just by material things, it can also by some devotional service that we are performing. Right? Suddenly I give a good class, I've remained humble for weeks, I give a good class, few people tell me, great class, I get hit by pride. So that is vichinna, on and off period of anartha nivritti. Then the next stage is prayaha, which means almost entirely gone. The anartha is nearly extinct, but it shows only under extreme conditions. Right? Extreme conditions, a devotee starts to use words which he's not meant to be using. Right? Not the correct words. But so it's almost gone, but in extreme conditions, um, that anartha still shows up. So it's almost gone. The next one is Sampurna, right? Sampurna, which is, as the word states, fully removed. Now the anartha has completely disappeared. It's not appearance and disappearance. It's completely gone. There is no mental taste for that anartha at all, right? Even Maya cannot do anything. The anartha is completely gone. And it's gone like the seed, which is completely dried up, completely burnt, and cannot sprout at all. And now the one more stage remains. So one may wonder, Sampurna, which means anarthas have completely gone. So what is this last stage that remains still in the anartha nivritti stage? It is called Ati Shuddha. Now Ati Shuddha means extremely purified beyond even subtle traces. We are discussing subtle right now. So this is beyond subtle traces. What does this mean? Not only has the anartha gone completely, but the heart has become so pure that the opposite quality shines. The opposite quality of compassion, of love now starts shining. So this is the level of exalted devotees who have attained bhava, but it's leading up to prema. Right? It's that stage. The opposite quality completely shines. When Srila Prabhupada arrived in New York, right, the Bowery was full of drunkards, full of drug addicts. There was, dirt everywhere, filth everywhere. There were broken streets. Yet Srila Prabhupada looked around, and what did he say? This place will become a holy dham. We will make everything over here Krishna conscious. That was his conviction. That was his firm faith, because the opposite in his heart was, happening. What was happening? He was able to see compassion everywhere. He was in a very purified state. So when where others saw filth and dirt and drug addicts, Prabhupada saw possibility. Possibility of what? Krishna's energy awaiting purification. A person starts to see Krishna's energy everywhere when the senses are becoming purified. So we can see that the devotee gradually surpasses even subtle sense objects. And once that's done, he becomes eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. as it states in the last line of the purport. Yes, we hear it all the time. We are not the body, but we are not even the subtle elements, which is mind, body, intelligence, which are also a part of body. Beyond all this, we are the soul. And just as a spark of fire has the same quality as the blazing fire, heat and light, in the same way, our soul has the same qualities as Krishna, obviously in minute quantity, but same eternity, eternal knowledge, and eternal bliss. But somehow, due to the illusionary energy, what happens? We are thinking that we are in the material world, covered by Maya. But what did Srila Prabhupada say? He said, we are actually in the spiritual world right now. Right now, we, all of us, each one of us are in the spiritual world. Many imagine that the spiritual world as a distant heaven after death. But Srila Prabhupada clarifies this not once, but a few times, that the spiritual world is our original position. We are now, at this moment, in the spiritual world, only covered by a material, temporary material body. So there is nothing that is separating us from the spiritual world other than our own illusion. That's the only thing that separates us from the material world. Nothing else separates us. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the goal of Bhakti Yoga is not to escape for heaven later, but to awaken our consciousness to the spiritual world right here, right now, gradually by removing all layers of material illusion. Right? Hare Krishna movement is just an extension of a dham. As Narottam Das Thakur mentioned, Golokera Premadhana Harinam Sankirtana. The entire Hare Krishna movement is basically the activity of the spiritual world, and it is following the nature of the spiritual world. The purpose is to be residents of the spiritual world. If we want to be the residents of the spiritual world, we gradually have to change. Consciously, we have to try to change. Right? When a person takes a step forward, he stretches his leg from the material world to the spiritual world. First, all the weight falls on the material side. But as we reach for the spiritual world, all the weight, what happens, suddenly starts to disappear, appears far away. And then because the spiritual world is very beautiful, it is very attractive. At first, it appears like a dream. But as we realize that we are in the spiritual world right here, right now, then it doesn't look like a dream to us anymore. Because if it still feels like a dream, we are still in illusion. Right? Then everything that we are talking about, what happens? When we hear these things again and again and again, what happens? Different pastimes, different descriptions of Krishna, little by little, sound so familiar. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm hearing this for the first time. No, it sounds very familiar. But we have different realization. And that's the whole point of reading and studying Bhagavatam. Yes, we must memorize verses. Yes, we must read books every day. But ultimately, these things must lead to different realization. It must decrease our proximity. It must increase our proximity towards Krishna, decrease the distance towards Krishna. That's the whole point of studying Srimad Bhagavatam. So, as the verse says, we must replace our sense gratification. We don't reject our senses, right? Because if we think we are rejecting our senses, we are going to fail. But we have to engage our senses and then we succeed. Because in the spiritual world as well, the senses are fully alive, but they are obviously free from material covering. And those coverings, little by little, we are going to take them off, right? सिद्ध देहे चिंता करे ताहिनी सेवना सखी भावा पाया Radha Krishna Rad Charana, which means after thinking of Radha and Krishna and their pastimes for a long time, and after getting completely free from material contamination, one is transferred to the spiritual world. There, the devotee attains an opportunity to serve Radha and Krishna. Right? So I think this is where I would like to end with Kali Yuga's greatest gift is the holy name, which goes deeper than all the subtle senses, which goes deeper than the mind. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, comments, or corrections, please feel free to share them. Okay, everyone have a... Yes, Prabhu, did you want to say something? Okay, thank you so much. Have a great Krishna conscious day. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Excellent class,
Thank
Mataji.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. That's a beautiful class.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.